Hello and welcome to How to Fail with Elizabeth Day, the podcast that celebrates the things that haven't gone right. This is a podcast about learning from our mistakes and understanding that why we fail ultimately makes us stronger. Because learning how to fail in life actually means learning how to succeed better. I'm your host, author and journalist Elizabeth Day, and every week I'll be asking a new interviewee what they've learned from failure. The actor Jamie Dornan once said that mass appreciation doesn't always equate to something good. It's true, of course, but this is a man who has had to get used to mass appreciation, whether he likes it or not. Starring as Christian Grey in all three of the 50 Shades of Grey movie adaptations brought him to the worldwide attention of millions of excitable fans who had devoured the E.L. James books on which the franchise was based. But Dornan has always been a multifaceted actor. In the critically acclaimed BBC drama The Fall, his portrayal of Paul Spector, a serial killer with an incongruously happy family life, was extraordinary both for its chilling nature and for the way it toyed with our preconceptions. Later, he played photographer Paul Conroy in A Private War, the biopic of the late great war correspondent Marie Colvin. It was, Dornan recalled, the most emotional job I will ever do. He and the real-life Conroy are still friends. Despite his success, Dornan did not start out as an actor. He was born in Hollywood, the one in County Down, and was the third child of Lorna, a nurse, and Jim, one of Ireland's leading obstetricians, a man who has delivered over 6,000 babies. After school in Belfast, Dornan became a model, and a highly successful one at that. The New York Times dubbed him the Golden Torso after he appeared in campaigns for Calvin Klein and Hugo Boss. And yet Dornan has said in the past that he never had much luck with the girls at school because he looked too young. His sister's friends called him cute, which he hated. Today, he is married to the musician Amelia Warner, and the couple have 3 daughters. They live their lives out of the public eye, and when Dornan is recognised back home in Northern Ireland, it is more often than not because someone wants to tell him that his father delivered them. This suits him just fine. As he said in an interview with the Belfast Telegraph in 2014, nobody sane wants to be famous. Jamie Dornan, welcome to How to Fail.
Thank you very much. I didn't know where to look there, but I got through the introduction.
You were visibly squirming and you're actually blushing slightly. It's very sweet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not someone who loves hearing praise about themselves, I think. I find it very difficult. I find it, embarrassing, I think. Embarrassed by praise. Yeah.
How sane do you feel today, given that quote about you'd have to be insane to want to be famous?
I feel like often I don't feel very famous. I only ever feel famous when I'm somewhere where people know I'm going to be. And there's a response to that understanding of the location, whether that's a premiere or whatever it is for a movie I've done. And then you see people have come to support you and the fellow cast, whatever it is, the movie itself. And you see a collective of people there for you. And a hunger sometimes, maybe, for you, that's when it's real. And all other times I don't get that. I don't feel like that. I don't think I put myself in a position to experience that. So I usually feel pretty sane because I don't feel that famous.
Has it ever got scary, your level of fame?
No. I mean, I remember saying, I did this interview for like GQ or Details or something before the first 50 Shades came out. And they said, what's your biggest fear with the movie coming out? And it was nothing about how it would be received, which we knew would be great for the people who love the book, and the total opposite of that for people who don't understand the book or weren't up for the movies. And it was very true to that, the response. But I remember saying I was scared of someone killing me on the red carpet.
Wow, that was probably unexpected for the journalist.
It was. She was quite taken aback by it. But I at that time, I genuinely believed it. I thought, someone's probably just going to kill me here. It was this dark place to put your mind. But I must have believed it to say it.
Well, when you were thinking that, was that after you'd played Paul Spector in The Fall?
Yes. So my mind's probably more open to darkness than it had been previously, and more accepting and more knowing what people are capable of, maybe, as a result of playing someone like that.
That performance was so phenomenal, Jamie. I loved The Fall so much. And you mentioned there that idea of going to quite a dark place. Like, how much research did you do into the mind of a serial killer? Because as I said in the introduction, one of the fascinating things was that Paul Spector existed as a family man alongside committing these brutal crimes.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny you said it there, like in terms of getting inside the mind of a serial killer. The first book I read was called Inside the Mind of a Serial Killer. Alan Cubitt, who created the show, changed my life. He sent me a few different books that he sort of had recommended to read, and I read them. They're not hugely digestible books, I've got to say. You know, they're tough. They're not enjoyable to read, really. They're not, I couldn't put it down situations. You know, they're kind of, I can't wait to put it down because I want to go to sleep in 10 minutes. And I don't want to go to sleep with this in my mind. But hugely beneficial to trying to build the character. And take not all aspects from these particular subjects that they were about and other guys that I've been told to sort of look into beyond those books. Take bits from them, really, but build on what Alan had created and what I felt was appropriate to take from what I'd read, but make it its own thing, you know, because every one of these monsters does it their own way. Much of the way Spector did it was on the page already, and I think that aspect of it, that fact that he was a grief counsellor by day and, you know, this strong, you know, family man. Alan and I argued about this. I always felt that he did have love for his kids, particularly his daughter. There's a special bond there. Alan, and he probably right because he created it. Only he really knows, but he felt that Spector was incapable of love. But I always tried to insert love into those scenes with the kids. And I think that's what made it all the darker, you know, was seeing that juxtaposition between the loving family man and the serial killer. I think that's what made it hard to watch for people.
You're surrounded by women in your life, aren't you?
From birth to right this day, I've only been surrounded by women at home.
What's it like being the father to 3 daughters? Because I often wonder how much of what we stereotypically think of wrongly as sort of girl stuff and boy stuff is innate.
Sure. Listen, I wouldn't have a clue how to parent a boy. I just wouldn't. It's not what I know. All I know is three little magical beings that we share our home with that fuel our every move. And there's been times where one kid, particularly our eldest, has been leaning more towards a sort of tomboyish attitude and being into things that you wouldn't classically expect a girl to be into, maybe. And that got me thinking that, oh, well, it really is like they're shaped into, you know, being into girls' things and boys' things. Maybe it's not innate, but then that ends up just being a bit of a phase, I think. I can only speak for my own kids. And then they do fall in line with what's kind of expected of little girls a little bit. I mean, the eldest would be less so. I mean, the youngest we don't really know yet, but the middle one is definitely more girly in a sort of classic sense, a sort of terrible phrase, than the elder one. But society is so much, no matter how much we try to change the sort of goalposts in terms of like trying to tell people they're one gender or the next, we're miles off it not affecting kids. You know, it's still, everything is pink and blue. As much as we try in our own home to not advocate that, we can't control everything they see and hear. And when they're at school and at play dates or wherever it is, or watching TV, that influence is beyond our control a lot of the time, you know. I feel like I'm here to be a father to girls. I feel like that's my calling, you know.
Oh, that's such a lovely thing to say.
That's just what I have, and I feel like it is meant. I do. I feel like I'm meant to be a daddy to those 3 wee girls.
Tell me a bit about how you feel on failure generally, and then we will get on to your specific failures. But is it something that you've always embraced or that you found quite difficult to confront?
I think probably as I've got older, been more capable of dealing with it. Kind of like everything in life, the older you get, the more capable you become. Learning along the way, I guess, is part of that. And I'm a believer in that with failure. You know, you're sort of nothing without your failures. And there's nobody who gets to any kind of considered high position or impressive position from the outside looking in who hasn't fail massively. It builds us, it makes us, it colours us, and it's essential. And I think I wear my failures like a badge of honour a little bit, because there's so fucking many of them. You know, particularly as an actor, you know, there just is, you know, there's very few people who fresh out of the blocks just get a great gig. I mean, funnily enough, my first ever job was a brilliant gig, and then you realise that it's actually not really like that, and then you fail a lot in between, but it stands you in way better stead for when good things do eventually happen, and sometimes they don't happen. I have a career where vast majority, I don't want to say fail, but like maybe don't get to continue on that path because of lack of work. There's horrible statistics about actors. At any given moment, there's only like 4 or 5% employed. There's none employed at the moment during lockdown. I struggle sort of how to judge failure. Some people, especially in my game, where there's people who maybe consider their career failure because they're always striving to have the same career as someone else, or a better career than someone else, or when they left drama school or whatever it is, they thought they'd have a certain career and they don't, but they have a career and they put food on the table and they provide and they have a mortgage and all the things that people strive for. But in their head, it's a failure because they expected something else of themselves. But from the outside looking in, people are like, you're a huge success. You know, you're never wanting of work. You can provide, but everyone's version of success is personal to them, I think. So everyone's failure is personal to them.
You're so right. And our expectations and how we express them to ourselves and our internal narrative, that's the key to being happier. I think managing expectation so that you're not feeling disappointed when you don't reach it.
Exactly.
Is the key. But do you regret any of your fashion failures, Jamie?
Listen,
I only ask.
Wise up.
Because there are quite a few paparazzi photos of you from the early days of your career when you were dating Keira Knightley, who I'm obsessed with, and you were wearing sort of seatbelt belts and kind of baggy jeans and Vans trainers.
Listen, I don't like you putting an S and making belts plural. Sorry. Because I had one seatbelt belt. It's very infamous. I have a stylist I work with when I'm doing stuff, Jean Yang, who's a magician, amazing woman. And she is based out in LA, and she styles me when I have press and stuff to do these days. And she brings up that green belt so often. It's hard to defend the indefensible. It wasn't glaringly bad at that time, I don't think, that belt. Am I allowed to talk about another podcast on this podcast?
I don't know, only if you criticise it. No, I'm kidding. Of course you're allowed. Of course you're allowed.
And my wife obviously listens to your podcast, but she also listens to the High Low, which I've listened to a bit myself. And I know those girls have... Millie will just come in sometimes chuckling and say, yeah, they brought you up and they were sort of digging through old paparazzi, which you're about to do right in front of me now, which is dreadful.
Seatbelt belt. I actually had a seatbelt belt, so you're okay. You're in good company.
I remember being delighted with myself when I bought that in Camden one day, because also you wore baggy trousers then, like baggy, big, dreadful looking jeans. Levi's Twisted. I remember buying those, thinking they were class, and they really, really weren't. I remember being with Keira one day and we were walking through Camden, and they were genuinely falling off my arse, which is kind of how I wore them anyway. But it was to a point where, I mean, it was like I needed help. And there, you know, shining in the sunlight was this green, awful shade of green seat belt. And I thought, bingo, here we go. That'll do the job. Not only will it serve a purpose, I'll look great. Turns out I didn't.
It's a bit like when you were talking about how fatherhood is your meaning, like that seatbelt was, you were destined, the two of you, to find each other.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I was pretty delighted when I lost it, I have to say. I don't know what became of it. That's one of those things you probably give to charity shop and they don't even put out on their stall. They're probably just saying, no, listen, no one's going to want that. You
said in past interviews that Keira Knightley gave you very good advice on how to handle fame. Not great fashion advice, but she did tell you, I think, to keep your childhood friends close.
Yeah, and Keira was good at that, and, you know, still is very close with Bunny, who's her, you know, best friend from school. And, you know, she had a nightmare time of it when we were...
Yeah.
I mean, we were kids when we met, you know. She was literally 18, I was 21 when we met, and it was 17 years ago now. She just got an awful time of it. You know, paparazzi were horrendous, and, you know, it really was at every single day, leaving her apartment or my apartment and hiding in bushes and all that sort of stuff. It was kind of gross. It wasn't kind of gross, it was really, really gross and invasive and not fun for young, very, very young people to be going through, for anyone to be going through really, but particularly vulnerable 18-year-old girl who's only trying to work out the world, you know, and then you've got to deal with that every day. I didn't have that issue, I have to say, because I've always had the same group of mates from school. I just had then, and I still have the same group now. Mostly boys and a few girls from school that are sort of everything to me, really. So I'm very lucky and fortunate in that way.
Talking of school, that brings us on to your first failure, which is your failure to do that well at school. Mm-hmm. And fun fact, we both went to the same school, although I am older than you, so I don't think we ever coincided because I left in the third year. But you went to school in Methody in Belfast.
Yep.
So tell me what happened at school.
I don't look back on school and think that it was a failure, because when I was at school, I felt that I was there to gain friends and play sport and sort of come out the other side with this sense of being part of a group and having a structure of friends in my life. I was very aware of that at school. I really felt like I want to be like friends with everyone. And it wasn't even to be popular. It was just to actually have friendship, and probably particularly boys, because I have two sisters and I was always sort of longing for brothers, basically. Not that, listen, I love my sisters, they're brilliant, but there's a part of you that always thinks if you've only got one sex siblings, of like, what would it be like to have the other? I really wasn't at school in my head to get an education. That was just not, it's terrible. And I tell my kids very differently now as a parent, but I didn't see it as school being about that. As much as my parents tried to drill into me that that's very much what school is meant to be about, I didn't see it that way. And as a result, I did no work. I really mean that in the truest sense of the word, no work. I really didn't. I don't say that with any pride at all. As I said before, it's not a message I will pass on to my kids. But, you know, when it came to like revision for stuff, and your mates would always be like, yeah, I've done nothing. Yeah, absolutely. Just done nothing. I'm not ready for this exam at all. And I'd be going, no, I've done nothing. And I go, yeah, no, me too. I'm serious. I've literally done nothing. I haven't opened the book. You know, if I've had study time, my dad's comes in to check an hour later to make sure, you know, I was literally like sort of making, you know, study graphs and colouring stuff in, and, you know, mucking about in my Game Boy or something, you know, just anything but revision. And the proof was in the pudding a wee bit. Like, I didn't do very well in my exams, and all my friends who said they hadn't done work but actually did a bit better than me, and then everyone else who worked very hard did a lot better than me. I also had an issue with school about how exams were. Like, I always felt like it was kind of just a memory test a lot of the time. You're being prepped for the particular questions that were going to come up, sometimes the exact questions that were going to come up, and the teacher would kind of have a sense of what it was going to be, even for the state exams, not even for the in-school, like the mocks and stuff, by the way, which is an easy way out. Like, I could have just learnt those answers and done the work and memorised stuff. You see the relief of people when they open their exam paper and they're like, oh, yeah, it came up. I would never even have that relief, because I wouldn't even have bothered to learn and revise and remember all this stuff. And like, I didn't do terribly at school. Like, I did enough to pass my GCSEs. I did enough to come back from my A-levels, just with a bit of negotiating here and there. But I struggled with the sort of structure of our school, and I felt that I would have potentially done better in a different school where whatever strengths that I had were harnessed a wee bit differently. I have a lot of good things to say about Methody, because, as I say, I've still got all my best mates in the world from that school and from a couple of other schools in Belfast, but friends from when I was a kid. But that whole structure of it, with the sort of donning the big black capes and the silly hats and putting this massive blockage between students and the teachers and making them so unapproachable and terrifying. I just don't think that's the way a school should be. And I understand that that comes from trying to insert respect into kids, so that you will respect these people who are in charge of you, and you will respect your elders and stuff. It actually makes me do the opposite. You'd have my respect if you smiled at me and knew my name and were wearing normal fucking clothes and not some fucking sinister black cape. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've always really struggled with that, you know. And even when early days when we were going to see some schools for our eldest, we were to see this school, And the headmaster was saying, we're very relaxed here, the kids, it's all first name terms. And I was saying all the right things I want to hear. And I said something along those lines of I've always found it very strange with that sort of us and them thing that teachers put at my school, very much so, that I don't know how to say it really, because I did have a good time at school, but
It sounds like you, which is interesting because I wouldn't initially have thought this about you, but you were a bit of a rebel.
I wouldn't say I was a rebel. I was sort of maybe trying to get to that. I wasn't badly behaved at school, but I did struggle with a lot of the sort of conforming at school, and that whole thing of if one of those teachers, the headmaster, the vice headmaster, whatever it is, headmistress, was walking down the corridor, they were so on you about your shirt being an inch untucked, or something, your collar being up a little bit because you've sort of thrown it on after PE class or whatever. So if you saw one of those teachers walking down the corridor, you were terrified. That shouldn't be the case. You shouldn't be terrified of your teachers. I feel like I was always on with my shirt untucked or whatever. So I wasn't a bad person, but I struggled with that sort of conforming to the rules that particular school set for me, and in the way they studied and the way you're harnessed in class. Because I didn't think I was stupid, but I felt like I was sort of made to feel I was stupid quite a lot at that school. And the school I went to, and you went to, was very much you're either going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or you're going to work in business. And there was really genuinely nothing else talked about. That was just the way it was, and maybe slightly about the time it was too. But if you sort of uttered the idea of doing anything outside of those three vocations, you're kind of laughed out of the room. You just weren't listened to. Not that I was sitting there going, I want to be an actor. I really didn't think that. I want
to be the golden torso.
I want to be that. That's a massive aim for a kid from Belfast. I want to be the golden torso. It's not as if I get it, but I never felt stupid, but I felt that I had something to give that maybe could have been harnessed better or seen maybe by teachers and stuff,
So interesting talking to you about it, because I had forgotten how terrifying methody was from that perspective. Mm-hmm. My memory of it was very much, I need to do well at exams to get approval.
Yeah.
And that was a kind of habit that shaped the rest of my life in quite a negative way, because I thought if I just work hard, I'll get approval and that will make me feel better about myself. Sure. And obviously that never really happened. My memory was much more, because I've always spoken with this English accent, that I didn't feel included or welcomed at all in my peer group. Yeah. So actually methody for me was not about friends at all. It was about feeling really isolated and sad and probably terrified, as you say, because it was so regimented.
If we could switch your experience with my experience, or we could combine the two, fuse them, it would be it'd be perfect. I mean, they'd be delighted with us. It would be the perfect product that they've created. The exam side of it, my mother died just after my GCSEs, and then 4 of my best mates were killed in a car accident, all from my year at school. The following summer, I wasn't in a great place, I've got to say, in my head. And that's when I was talking about, we had these negotiations. I'd done okay in my GCSEs, but my mum was dying the whole way through, and I wasn't doing any work anyway. But that had sort of become this other huge factor when it came to working out what I would do next in terms of A-levels and stuff. And we came to this deal that I would stay at school, do my A-levels at methody, but I'd board for 2 years. We had a boarding department. It's actually quite good. If you've gone through school your whole school life as a day pupil, and there's a boarding department at that school, you're always fascinated by what goes on in there. When they go behind that wee door, what happens down there? It's just a whole other world that you just aren't privy to. So you get to do that once you're a bit more assured of yourself and you're 16, 17, 18, and you're probably at the right end of the totem pole in terms of what happens in boarding and the bullying that goes on in every boarding school probably. And I played rugby and stuff, and that was a big help in boarding to go in and be in the rugby team. You knew you weren't going to get messed about, to be honest. So I didn't do well, mate. I was about to say I did okay. I didn't do well. I got C, D, E, I think. But I got enough to get into a university that I didn't want to go to, but I was sort of forced to go. Not forced to go to, but it just seemed like the done thing. Like what we're saying about that type of school is you chose the right A-levels to stay in the same path to get to this certain goal, which always struck me as quite a boring goal. And the only thing I ever knew about myself growing up was that I didn't want to work in an office. That's the only thing I've ever truly known about myself. I just don't have the right patience, aptitude. I don't really know how to categorize it, but I just knew that I didn't want to do that. I'm not saying that means I wanted to be an actor or anything else, frivolous as that but I knew that I didn't want to do that. And all of these things I was being led towards were kind of pushing me in that direction. So I didn't do very well with my A-levels, and then I went to a uni that I kind of only went to because I got in to do a marketing degree and absolutely no interest. You know, my school would have been kind of happy with that because it's something that could end in a sort of relatively serious job. And the whole time I felt like I was sort of making those decisions against my will. I guess this sort of comes back to in terms of why I think it ended up being good for me, sort of failing at school, is had I worked, had I really taken those exams seriously, those mock exams, those your GCSEs, your A-levels, and I mean, even A-levels, I swear to God, I'm not doing it to sound, it's not even cool, even if I didn't do any work for my A-levels. Nothing. I mean, literally nothing. Went to uni. I went to 9 hours of uni, 5 of them in Freshers Week. So then I spent 8 months, and I went to 4 hours of university in 8 months. I played rugby 4 days a week and drank a lot. I had a good time, I've got to say, but I knew I wasn't on the right path. Had I done better in my A-levels and then gone to uni and done a course I really wanted to do and done very well and come out with a good degree, I'd be on a very different path and I just wouldn't be happy. So actually that failure at school, for me, not for everyone obviously, but for me, worked to my favour in a really big way.
So I want to come back to what happened next, but I just want to pause and acknowledge what you went through as a 16-year-old with your mother dying and then your 4 friends dying in a car crash. And I'm so, so sorry.
Thanks.
And how do you deal with that grief at that age?
I had counselling, very open to admit that. I didn't actually until the accident, I don't think, which is 13 months after my mum had died, which had a huge impact on, well, the entire country, really. It was a very big, horrific event, but particularly, you know, my friendship group, obviously. And that's not true. I had a bit of counselling after mum died before that, and then that happened and I had more counselling. Because you don't really have a clue. You sort of don't have a clue what's going on in the world anyway when you're 16, 17. And it's a lot of change happening at that time in your life, and a lot of very big decisions are being made about your future at that age. And weirdly, in a way, maybe not being able to totally focus on that in a way that other kids may have been was a benefit to me in hindsight, if you're trying to claw to take any kind of positive out of such a horrendous situation. But it was so bleak, clearly, and affects you every day. I mean, actually, I've had a very tearful week, honestly, about my mum particularly. I'm writing a script at the moment, and we've just finished the first draft and now going through it. And second drafting it, I'm writing it with a very good friend of mine. And we are 2 main sort of protagonists in the movie are kids who've lost their parents when they're teenagers. And so much of it I haven't even been accepting of the fact that that happened to me. It's really weird. And then I'll finish the day and I'm like writing about these kids, talking to each other, trying to help each other through what that grief must be like. And I've been sort of blanking it, I guess, as some sort of defense mechanism probably. And then feeling sort of bereft at the end of the day. And my writing partner will see it. He'll be like, "You've got to stop." And I'll be, "Yeah, okay." And then I'll like cry for an hour. It's been the maddest experience, but also quite cathartic and good, you know, ultimately, I think.
I don't want to upset you further, but I'm aware that when people lose someone and they're in the public eye, that they often get asked about the experience of that loss for them and what happened afterwards. But I just wanted to offer a chance for you to say what your mum was like.
I mean, she was incredible. I mean, very beautiful, like truly beautiful looking, arrestingly beautiful looking woman. An amazing smile, very quick-witted, incredibly glamorous. You know, my mum's from a farm in Portadown, but you wouldn't know it talking to her. My whole family, like my sisters sound very different to me, and my mum did too. And my dad has sort of inherited this slightly posh accent thing, and my mum really, like, considering she grew up in Portadown, I mean, she really got far away from Portadown, her accent, but it was all part of the way she carried herself and the sort of glamour that she had. And it's a very odd thing and not a very nice thing to have to admit that there's many aspects of my mum that I don't remember. Truly just don't have a very strong recollection, and I use my sisters a lot and my dad to try to build on the memories I have of mum, because they're fleeting for me, to be honest. And this is in a time, you know, Mum died in 98. It's before you filmed absolutely everything on your phone. And, you know, there's not a huge amount of sort of documentary footage, let's say, of my mum. So, and I love it. Like when something does come into my mind, I'll get this like little nugget that comes into my mind of something I had forgotten that my sister will mention to me or something. And I love that. And then I try to harness that as best I can, make sure I don't forget that again. My dad's very proud and loves, you know, the line of work I've fallen into and everything. But my mum would have really got a serious kick out of it.